Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today I'm here with another World's deck analysis for you guys. This one, as you can see, is going to be on Volcanion from Steam Siege, a new contender from Steam Siege itself, and a really fun deck. Unfortunately, because of some cards that we see later on in the deck, I haven't been able to play with this deck online really. But I've done a few sort of solitaire hands with it, and I'm really enjoying this deck. I've spent probably the past 2 or 3 hours just whilst I've been doing other stuff playing solitaire hands with this deck, and it goes off like a rocket. It's really quick, really aggressive, but has sort of the ability to, or inbuilt survivability as well. So I think this is definitely one that's under the radar, and you could really sort of slip through the cracks with this deck, and I think do quite well going into Worlds, because I don't think people will really be thinking about this deck too much. I think they'll be thinking about the more conventional things like Night March and Vespivile, meaning that I think Volcanion could sort of sweep the rug from underneath everyone and do pretty well. Of course, we are starting with the Pokemon 3 of the Baby Volcanion from Steam Siege. Really good Pokemon. One of the best cards in Steam Siege, I think, between this and the Volcanion-EX. Power Heater, very reminiscent to Oblivion Wing from Yveltal, doing 20 damage for 1 fire energy, and letting you attach a fire energy to 2 of your benched Pokemon, which is really strong. Obviously 10 less damage, but 1 more energy. I think Volcanion is the better of the 2 accelerators. And then he does have access to a second attack, Steam Artillery, for 3 fire, does 100 damage, but we do have better non-EX attackers in the deck. This is the deck's sort of energy acceleration. There are a couple of Blacksmith in here as well, which I'll get into in a minute. But this is the deck's sort of energy acceleration, and it's a really good energy acceleration at that. I think this is, like I say, one of the best cards from Steam Siege, and a really strong effect. 2 energy, well, potentially 3 energy on turn 1, if you're including your attachment for the turn. Makes Volcanion a really good Pokemon, and kind of what helps this deck sort of tick. We've also got 2 Volcanion-EX from Steam Siege. Steam Up, letting you do an extra 30 damage to your opponent's Pokemon if you discard a fire from your hand. All of the attackers that we want to be using at least are basic fire Pokemon, so they are going to benefit from Steam Up. Just helps with the maths really. Means that you can knock out EXs with non-EXs so much easier than you used to be able to. Means that you can reach for knockouts using less resources as well. Volcanion itself can also use his attack Volcanic Heat for 130. That number's really nice actually, because obviously you've got normal 130 Pokemon like Yveltal that I mentioned earlier on, like Volcanion I suppose as well. Anything with less than 130 HP, you don't need to do much else. But if you're going for EX knockouts with 1 Fury Belt and 1 Steam Up, you can hit that 170, which seems to be the average HP of EX Pokemon at the moment. So it means that Volcanion himself can actually knock out EXs with relative ease, which is really nice. And I think 130 is a really good number for Volcanion. Other attackers, we've got 2 of the Ancient Trait Entei and 1 of the Combat Blaze Entei. Combat Blaze is a really nice attack. It's an attack that makes your opponent really think about the amount of Pokemon they're benching, especially if they don't know you're playing it to start with. They're just going to bench everything they can, just out of being able to try and set up. You dropping the Combat Blaze can really sort of disorient them, doing a lot of damage out of nowhere. 2 energy isn't even that hard to come by with the Blacksmiths. It can be set up in a turn, which means it's a really strong sort of out the blue attacker. Though personally I think the Ancient Trait Entei is better just because it has so much more versatility. Being able to attach 2 tools makes this card pretty much an EX in non-EX, only giving up one prize because it's a non-EX. It lets you have 2 Fury Belts, taking his HP up to a whopping 210, which for a non-EX Pokemon is huge. Also increasing any damage by 20, which is again really nice. It means that you only need 1 Steam Up to be able to knock out EXs, turn after turn with Heat Tackle. So obviously you're more often than not going to be trading this guy up 2 prizes to 1 prize minimum, unless you're facing a non-EX deck. And if you're facing a non-EX deck, you're going to be doing enough damage to knock them out before you even think about using Steam Up as well, which means that you're you don't even have to worry about getting Volcanions out if you don't want to. You can still, I suppose you can still get one out, and it does help with the maths, but you very rarely need to, I find. Heat Tackle pretty much knocks out all non-EXs in the format at the moment, I think, that are super relevant. There's actually 2 that I'm thinking of that it doesn't knock out, but with Volcanion, you are able to knock out Trevenant Break and Greninja Break. So yeah, that's really, really useful. And then Flame Screen, if you're not able to knock out a Pokemon for whatever reason, maybe you don't have the energy to use Steam Up or whatever, Flame Screen is just a nice attack to be able to do a little bit of damage to your opponent, and then sort of protect yourself from being knocked out that next turn, protecting your energy, especially as you now have we now have Fighting Fury Belt as well. It means that you've got 210 HP, you're reducing damage by 30, and you've done 30 damage minimum to them as well, or 50 damage I suppose with the Fury Belts, meaning that you're going to be able to knock them out next turn. It's kind of securing the 2 prize thing, like I said earlier on, meaning that Entei pretty much always trades up 2 prizes for 1 just because of how bulky this thing is. Finally, we've got 3 Setup Shaymin and 1 Aroma of Gratitude Shaymin. The Shaymin, the Setup Shaymin, obviously, we all know what it does, being able to refresh the hand. A lot of the energy found in this deck is going straight in the discard using various methods, so Shaymin often gets a lot of value because Ultra Balls, you're often just throwing away fire energy just to be able to use Volcanion or Blacksmith with them. So Shaymin's often getting a lot of value, and we do also run DCs, so it does mean that we do have access to Sky Return if that is something we need to do. Very rare that we'll need to do that, but with Night March everywhere, you may want to be able to get rid of your Shaymins if that's the case, and just being able to have access to that is always really, really useful as well. We've also got 1 Aroma of Gratitude Shaymin. Trevenant Break can be a bit of an issue for the deck, but this Aroma of Gratitude Shaymin makes it really, really hard for them to be able to do much. It means that they're effectively doing 10 damage a turn rather than 30. Obviously it doesn't work quite like that, but most of the time they're doing 10 damage instead of 30, which is really, really good. And because of the amount of damage we can do with this deck, it means that you can kind of trade into Trev Breaks every turn. If they can keep consistently getting Trevenant Breaks out turn after turn, with especially this Entei here, the Ancient Trait Entei, you're able to knock out Trev Breaks really, really easily. Same with the Volcanion, I guess. Anything that can do 160 a turn is really, really strong. And with Shaymin, it also increases inbuilt survivability against Trevenant Break. Not only that, it's really useful Trevenant Break, but just the extra heal of 20 a turn in other matchups can sometimes prevent your opponent from being able to knock you out. So just having access to that is, I think, really, really useful. So yeah, let's move on to the trainers. On supporters, starting off with 3 Sycamore. I don't think we need 4. This deck runs quite a lot of items, which is a little bit risky in a format that has quite a lot of item disruption and item lock. But I think if you can go, you're pretty much always going to get 1 turn of items, unless you're against someone who is able to Wally Trevenant you, which can be an issue. But even so, I think you can more often than not use a lot of your items, which means that we don't always need 3 Professor Sycamore. Also, sometimes we're going to want to be using Blacksmith on turn 1 rather than Sycamore. So rather than having 4 Sycamore to ensure finding Sycamore on turn 1, we've just put in a second Blacksmith in here to be able to find the Blacksmith much more consistently turn 1 if we need it. Sycamore obviously also gets rid of your energy, but we've got loads of ways to do that as well, so it's just one of those cards that I think you'll see in pretty much every deck at the moment. Like I say, 2 Blacksmith, combined with Volcanion, it means you can get 5 energy down in 1 turn, which is madness. Actually, you can do that turn 1 if you have the correct setup. It's quite tedious and it is difficult to do, but you can get 5 energy on turn 1, which is just kind of crazy. Also kind of accelerates us into being able to power up any of our attackers in 1 turn. Because we run DCEs, we can power up Entei's in a turn, and all of the other attackers only require 3 energy, so we only need to find 1 fire. But it means that we can really push aggressively early on in the game. It means that we can also if we don't have access to Volcanion, or we don't want to have to waste a turn using the Volcanion's attack to be able to then set up a knockout, we still have access to being able to boost our energy acceleration for 1 turn really quickly. So yeah, it just really helps with early aggression, things like that. We've got 2 Lysandre. Having access to a second Lysandre, I think, is really useful. It means that we're not relying on finding 1 in the Trevenant matchup. There's another thing that is really useful in the Trevenant matchup. If you can't find your Shaymin, being able to Lysandre out of the lock, or Hex out of the lock, that I'm going to go into in a second. If you're able to Lysandre or Hex out of the lock, it means that you are able to then look for Shaymin with no issue of not being able to use your items, things like that. So having access to a second is really good. Obviously, it also lets you pick and choose your targets. It means that we can take prizes on bench Shaymins that are just not really doing anything, especially as most of the attackers in the deck are able to do 110 relatively easily, whether it's through just doing enough damage anyway, or steam up, or fighting Fury Belts, anything like that. We do have a lot of different ways of being able to do huge damage like that on things like Shaymin for 2 easy prizes to end out the game. So just having access to, I think, is really useful. We've got 1 Hex. Like I say, not only does it help with the Trevenant matchup, meaning that their lock is broken for a turn, it also helps with Greninja, which obviously we're completely weak to Greninja, but being able to stop their snipes can slow them down a little bit. I still think the matchup, how I'm thinking how it would play out in my head, I still think Greninja definitely has the upper hand just through weakness, because Greninja, even without their abilities, can still do a lot of damage. But even so, having their Hex can still slow them down. If you can slow them down enough, you can perhaps win that prize trade. I think it's definitely very difficult, but we think with really efficient things like Entei, sometimes I think you can win the prize trade. I think it's very rare, but I think without Hex, the matchup would be pretty much unwinnable. So Hex is really important for that. We've got 1 N just as a hand refresh. Having access to hand refresh is always really good. The format is really aggressive at the moment as well. And whilst this deck in itself is kind of aggressive, meaning that more often than not you're going to be ending yourself to a low hand, if you're ending yourself if you're ending your opponent to a low hand as well, it can sort of slow them down. I mean, you can come back. It's kind of a comeback card, like I say, and it can still help you. I think having hand refresh is always really useful, and without a doubt, N is the best hand refresh you've got in the format at the moment. Finally, we've got 1 AZ. Another card that's just nice having access to. We've got with the AZ, we've got 3 ways of switching out that isn't manually retreating in the deck, and the other 2 ways are item based. So we don't want to sort of be stuck with something while Trevenant's active, or we're being toad locked, anything like that. So having access to a non-item based switch is also always really useful as well. So yeah, I think AZ sort of justifies his place just because of that. But being able to pick up Shaymins, damage Volcanions, anything like that, just always a really useful card, and I think one that is definitely really useful in the deck, especially as you can reuse Steam Siege, or sorry, not Steam Siege, Steam Up with Volcanion as well, I believe. I'm 99% sure how that's how it works. So yeah, I think AZ just has really useful applications in the deck, and having a non-item based switch is also always really useful in a format that is kind of item lock, very item locky at the moment, with things like Trevenant and Seismitoad everywhere. For Via Seeker, I think this is how we get away with 2 Blacksmith. We used to have 3 in this list, but we cut 1 simply because we're running 4 Via Seeker and 2 Compressor and the 3 Volcanions, so you definitely don't need 4 like you used to in fire decks. I think you can now get away with 3. I think you can even get away with 2 like we have here. 3 would be safer, but I think it's better off as like a 3rd Sycamore or something instead, just as more aggressive card draw. But yeah, you know what Via Seeker does. And same with Ultra Ball, lowers the hand size for Shaymin, gets energy in the discard for Volcanion and Blacksmith, and searches out anything in the deck, so really useful ball search. For Trainer's Mail, consistency card. We've got a lot of trainers in the deck, so being able to search through the top 4 just to find an extra trainer kind of works as kind of draw a card rather than search for a trainer, because more often than not we are going to hit one of these influential trainers. So I think Trainer's Mail is really, really useful. And very similarly, Acro Bike. Another really, really good consistency card, especially in a deck that does not mind at all discarding fire energy. More often than not, that's going to be what you're looking to discard, meaning that you're powering up Blacksmith or Volcanion and still drawing a card in the process. So yeah, these are the cards you want to be seeing turn 1, and Trainer's Mail gets you into them as well. We've then got 2 Battle Compressor. Compressor is really, really good for sort of Blacksmith combos. With 1 Compressor you can get a Blacksmith and 2 Fire Engine into the discard, meaning that your Blacksmith is alive straight away if you can get a VS Seeker. It also works with Volcanion, getting 2 energy ready to use Power Heater to be able to power your Pokemon up through that way. Also gets rid of any dead cards in any specific matchups. There's no major dead cards, but maybe towards the end of a matchup where you're looking for specific cards to end out the game. If you still have access to a Compressor or 2, it means that you can thin the deck and carry on going, finding the cards that you need as and when you need them. So yeah, again, just kind of consistency cards really, but really, really help with things like Blacksmith and Volcanion. 1 Escape Rope. Again, just a nice, useful way of being able to retreat when you're not item locked. Unfortunately, a lot of this deck has Chunky Retreat, and we only have 1 Floatstone in here. So pick and choose when you use your Escape Rope, I think is probably one of the most important things, just because you don't want to end up escape roping in a situation where you're getting something really, really good from your opponent's side, but then you can't really deal with it. But obviously another really nice combo, or the fact that Volcanion has 2 retreat, so it means that you can rope out of there after you've used Power Heater, yeah, not Steam Up, that's the EX's ability. After you've used Power Heater to set something up the turn before, you can use Escape Rope to get Volcanion out of there without having to manually attach to discard or anything like that. So just gives us sort of versatility when it comes to retreating. This deck does have a lot of chunky retreaters, and it would be nice to get another Floatstone or something like that in, but unfortunately with what we've got at the moment, we've only got 1 Escape Rope along with the Floatstone that I will be showing in a second. We've got 4 Fighting Fury Belt. Entei with 2 Fighting Fury Belt has 210 HP, which is Mega Pokemon HP, and only gives it 1 prize, and boosts his attack damage by 20, meaning that he can trade it up really, really efficiently. So I think Fury Belt's kind of a no-brainer in this deck. And yeah, it just makes Entei such a tank. Works with all of the other Pokemon in the deck as well, meaning that you can really, really adapt your numbers between the extra 30s you get from Volcanion-EX and the extra 10s you can get from Fighting Fury Belt. It makes a lot of numbers much more accessible than usual. And then, as I mentioned, we've got Glare. We've got 1 Floatstone as well, to be able to just have a bit more versatility when looking to retreat things. Always having a pivot is also really, really useful after something gets knocked out. So you don't have to make any decisions straight away. We do have Floatstone, which is really, really useful. Finally, onto the stadiums, we've got 2 Parallel City and 2 Scorched Earth. Parallel City is actually really, really useful in the Night March matchup. Obviously, you're placing it with the 3 bench on your side, meaning that you're getting rid of your Shaymins, and if they can't find their Dimension Valley, it means that they can't use things like Target Whistle and Pokepuff to get your Shaymins back onto the bench for them to start trying to take prize or take prize advantage on you. So yeah, Parallel is really, really good. Also helps in things like Aqua Box and Greninja. It turns them from kind of unwinnable situations to just very unfavourable. I think the matchups are still pretty awkward, but it does mean we still have access to a way to slow them down as well. And if sort of the cards go right and things go your way, you can, I think, still win those matchups if you're particularly lucky and hit everything you need when you need it. And then obviously Scorched Earth fits in really well with Blacksmith and Volcanion. Draw 2 cards, discard a fire energy, ready to power up your Pokemon. Just kind of makes sense in anything that you don't specifically need Parallel City for. Finally, we have 8 fire energy, just so we have access to them as and when we need them. It's meant to be 8. One of them's stuck under there. And then we've got 3 DCE, simply because it means that we can power up Entei in a turn, meaning that we're doing 130 out of the blue really quickly. And then with things like Steam Up and Fighting Fury Belt, we can easily hit knockouts just from the setup between a Blacksmith and a double Colourless. There is meant to be an 8th energy. I can't find where it's stuck. But yeah, having access to these 3 DCEs means that Entei is can be set up really quickly, and it also means that, like I say, we can apply real early pressure with a non-EX that has huge HP and still applies or takes 2, more often than not takes 2 prizes without a doubt, and only like I say, with huge HP, only trades 1 prize. Entei is such a good Pokemon in this deck, especially, like I say, with the Fighting Fury Belt. But yeah, that's the deck. Like I say, I've had a few solitaire hands with it over the past few hours, and I'm really enjoying it. As soon as I can get access to a Shaymin online, I'm indeed going to start playing it online. But unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not able to play with. Well, I'm not able to play the deck. Oh, there was the extra energy. I'm not able to play with the deck simply because I can't get hold of a Shaymin. But yeah, I think it's one that a lot of people will kind of put to the back of their mind. They may have realised that people might try it, but I think, like I say, a lot of people are going to be testing things like Vespivile, more, what's the word? Decks that they're more likely to see, more expected matchups. And therefore, I think, like I say, Volcanion could slip between the cracks and potentially do really well, especially if you can trade up in EX matchups and be as consistent as the deck can be with things like Volcanion from Steam Siege in non-EX matchups to always have the energy that you need. I think this deck is poised to potentially do really well going into Worlds this weekend. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Keep it locked here for the next few weeks. It's obviously Worlds is this weekend, and then we're going to be moving pretty much straight into post-rotation stuff. We've got loads of ideas for you guys, so make sure you stay tuned over the next couple of weeks to hear about all the changes we've got, or all of the plans we've got coming to the channel. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. As always, I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.